Hey there, welcome back to another review. This time it's the first of many giant ape King Kong movies that I will be reviewing for this month because it's Ape Month. I'm going all ape, going ape shit crazy with these ape movies. Hopefully I don't run into any ape shit because that would not be very fun. But anyway, I'm starting out with the film that started it all, in a lot of ways, the 1933 film King Kong. Now, this is a movie that is definitely a classic. In my opinion, I think it's a wonderful film. And it's also a film that, for some reason, I really did not get around to watching until fairly recently. Now, I had known about the movie. I was definitely familiar with the film. I had read about the effects. I definitely knew it existed. I definitely knew of its existence. I had seen a few clips here and there, but I had never actually seen the whole film. And I find that, and it's kind of funny because I had watched the 1976 remake a bunch of times. I had watched King Kong Lives a bunch of times growing up. I think I remember seeing the 2005 Peter Jackson film either in the theater or definitely rented it when it came out. So it's kind of crazy that I never actually got around to seeing the original King Kong until a couple days ago. And I really do believe it lives up to its moniker as the eighth wonder of the world. It's a wondrous, wonderful film. They definitely don't make movies like this anymore. And in some ways, I definitely understand. In other ways, it's kind of too bad because there's this certain innocence and charm to this film that is definitely missing from a lot of movies lately. But then there's also some really sadistic, messed up things about this movie that are pretty shocking, and I think would probably be even shocking for audiences back in 1933. Now, this is the 2-disc special edition DVD. It's actually got a good amount of features. The transfer is great. And I would have to say, after watching this, this is definitely right up there with my favorite King Kong films. I really, really loved this. I thought this was a fantastic film. I can see why people consider this to be a classic and one of the best movies of its genre and from its era, because it absolutely is. I mean, I can't even think of one thing I personally found wrong with it, except for some little nitpicky things here and there. Now, the film was directed by Merian C. Cooper and Ernest B. Schoedsack, based on a screenplay by James Creelman and Ruth Rose. It also features a story by Edgar Wallace and Merian C. Cooper, and it stars Fay Wray, who most people know who she is, and I could see why she has honestly stood the test of time and is as synonymous with the film as the giant ape is, because she's a beautiful woman. I mean, a stunningly gorgeous woman. And she had this personality about her that stood out to me even in 2017. I mean, there was just this, she was just a very electric personality. I can see why people remember her, and I can see why she left an impression on so many people. It also features Robert Armstrong as Carl Denham. Fay Wray plays Ann Darrow. Bruce Cabot plays Jack Driscoll. Bruce Cabot's character, Jack Driscoll, he honestly reminded me a lot of Harrison Ford. He had the same kind of no gruff attitude. It was very similar line delivery. And I know he came out, he was around before Harrison, but it was just kind of interesting to see a similar dynamic in terms of the way an actor interacts with the rest of his cast. That's similar to an actor that I'm pretty familiar with in Harrison Ford. Frank Reicher plays Captain Englehorn. You have Noble Johnson, who plays a native chief. Steve Clemente plays a witch doctor in the film. James Flavin plays Briggs. Sam Hardy plays Charles Weston. Victor Wong has an uncredited role as Charlie the Cook. I don't think it's the same Victor Wong. It's a completely different Victor Wong. It is absolutely not the Victor Wong that I'm thinking of, and maybe you might be thinking of. No, it's not Victor Wong from Big Trouble in Little China or Three Ninjas. Everett Brown also plays a native who is in an ape costume and has an uncredited role. The other Victor Wong's role as Charlie the Cook was one of the few problems I had with it. But it was just a little thing, and it's only because I'm just not used to that type of portrayal of an Asian character. Because this is definitely kind of, I don't know if racist is the right term for it, but it definitely felt a little bit intolerant, or it was kind of uncomfortable at times. But at the same time, it's of the time period. That wasn't bad. That wasn't offensive. That wasn't a bad thing for a writer or an audience in 1933. So what might be uncomfortable for me now wasn't that way back then. And that's only one of the, that's, I mean, there's other stuff in this that's a lot more uncomfortable than, or intense or crazy than the stuff with Victor Wong. Now, the movie also features music by Max Steiner. I think this is actually a really great score. It fits the film really well. There are certain sequences when there's action going on, there's a bunch of adventure. There's certain sequences that really do, are really enhanced by this score. It features cinematography by Eddie Linden, Vernon Walker, and J.O. Taylor. Cinematography back then is a lot different than it is now because you're shooting in black and white and didn't really have a lot of tricks of the trade. There's no steady cam, there's none of this other stuff. So cinematography is admittedly less impressive than it is now, but for the time period, they did a good job. And it's edited by Ted Chessman, and the editing was, I thought the editing was really impressive for all of the different effects work that are in this film. There's all this different stuff going on with the stop motion effects and how the stop motion is incorporated into an actual shot. This is before green screen, I believe. I don't think green screens existed. They might have, but they had like a different thing they used to put the stop motion footage or some of the other stuff behind the actors or in the background. Um, yeah, it was very impressive. I honestly thought it was just one of those films that, from a technical standpoint, is really a standout. It's a one of a kind film. It's very unique with its presentation compared to a lot of the other films that had similar ideas around the same time. This is definitely one of the most impressive and one of the most consistently good creature features of the 30s, without a doubt. And it was released by RKO actually in the US in 1934, but it's mostly known as a 1933 film. But it had its first release date was in March of 1934 in New York, and then it had a release date in It was released in Los Angeles on March 24th in the same year. So the New York release was in March 7th. March 24th was in Los Angeles. And then a month later, on April 7th, around a month later, it got a wide release in the U.S. The movie cost about $672,000, which was a lot of money back then, and it was definitely put on the screen. The effects alone were absolutely worth every penny. Adjusted to inflation, that's a $12 million budget. That's still not that much money. It made $2.8 million in the box office, which was unheard of back then. And you adjust that to inflation, and it made $51 million. And this is not counting the other rental grosses it got later in its run. King Kong was actually also famous for being the first film by Criterion to ever be released on Laserdisc. Criterion Collection, for those of you who might not be familiar with this, the Criterion Collection, which if you're a Blu-ray or DVD collector, you're definitely very familiar with them. They actually started out making Laserdiscs. And King Kong was the first one they put out. And it was one of a kind. It had a commentary track and a few other things. And that's something that had never been heard of before on that particular format or on any format. And that's kind of stuff that we look at now as, oh, DVDs or Blu-rays with features. Like, that's just something that is just commonplace. But back then, it really wasn't. So, I find that to be a cool little bit of trivia, is that King Kong was also the first Criterion Laserdisc. Now, the film, of course, features some Oscar-worthy stop-motion effects, but these effects actually were not nominated for an Oscar because at this time there really was not such a thing as an effects Oscar. It didn't exist. Um, so it just was one of those things. Willis O'Brien was, I think he was recognized for it later, but not immediately. And Willis O'Brien also had a protege who went on to work with him on a bunch of other movies. That was Ray Harryhausen, which I think is really cool that there's a connection between Willis O'Brien, who brought to life Kong and a lot of these other monsters, these dinosaurs and creatures on Skull Island. He also was a mentor to, and he trained and taught the tools of the trade to Ray Harryhausen, whose name is synonymous with stop motion for a lot of people who are familiar with stop motion effects. It's really cool seeing stop motion effects again. That's a lost art that you really don't see used that often, unless it's in something like Robot Chicken or it's that kind of thing. But you really don't see it used very often in the way that it's used in King Kong. And there are certain shots in this that look really great. I think they really hold up really well. And I can't even imagine how blown away audiences were when they saw this film for the first time in 1933 in the theater. It it would have been a spectacle. It would be unlike anything they had ever seen before. And in a lot of ways, it's like I said, it's still impressive, even now, even today. Now, the film has I personally think it has a pretty simple plot, and I like that. There's not a lot of character development. So what I don't understand, there's been some critics who have criticized Kong Skull Island and some other Kong movies for not having a lot of character development with their characters. Well, King Kong doesn't have any character development either. The one that started it all, the 1933 film, it just goes straight into the action. There's brief little introductions to these characters, but you don't know that much about them. In fact, everyone gets on the island about 25, 26 minutes into the movie. So by the 30-minute mark, everyone's already on Skull Island, which I think is really cool, actually. I think that's a great choice. And this film was very impressively paced to me. For a movie that's 104 minutes, or 109 minutes, yeah, 104 minutes, it moved at a really good pace for a film of its time. And think about, folks, this is before we had, stuff like the editing software that people use nowadays to add a little bit of an extra punch to a film, and with the editing, or the Steadicam, or any of these other ways of moving the camera around, or using a drone, or any of this stuff. That kind of stuff wasn't even around back then. And also screenwriting, it was rare that you had a script that had all this stuff going on in it, and this story where these intrepid explorers go onto this island and they encounter this giant ape, and it actually ended up being a film that was really well paced and didn't have these long moments where not much happened. Um, that's definitely one of the things that stood out the most to me is how well paced this film was and how entertaining the movie is, even in 2017. Uh, Now, the pacing is a little bit slowed down in the beginning because this version opens up with Overture, which is just 4 minutes of just a screen that says Overture on it, and like music that's admittedly good. It's nice to listen to, but this Overture just lasts way too long, and then I'm like, why is it here? And it's because I think it probably served a purpose back when the film came out, but it doesn't serve much of a purpose now if you watch it, other than to maintain the authenticity of the most authentic screening possible of King Kong, the way that it was seen in 1933 or 1934 when it was released, which is kind of crazy. It's known as a 1933 film, but it was released in the U.S. in all these different theaters in 1934. I guess 1934 just doesn't have the same ring to it as 1933. But yeah, the overture, it was just like, okay, all right, I get it, but I kind of don't get it. I mean, what is the point of it? Can someone, if someone can explain in the comments down below what the point of an overture was for a film like this, please let me know. Is it because they didn't have trailers back then, and so they had like a 4-minute overture before the movie started, so people can like get their popcorn and their drinks and all that kind of stuff, and they can get themselves situated before the movie starts? I mean, maybe that's what it is. I'm just not familiar with the term overture or an overture period because we don't really get overtures nowadays. It's not something that you see. So, but yeah, this 4-minute overture, and then the movie starts. And I was actually surprised by how witty some of the dialogue was. I actually chuckled a few times at the back and forth between Carl Denham and some members of his staff. Now, the film starts out in the New York harbor, where you have filmmaker Carl Denham, who's famous for making wildlife films in remote and exotic locations. He charters Captain Englehorn's ship, the Venture, for his new project, but he is unable to secure an actress for a female role he has reluctantly added to the script because a lot of people are asking him for the script. You know, they not asking for the script. They want a female character in the script, maybe to help the box office. Now, right away, I was really impressed with Robert Armstrong. I really liked this guy's performance. He had this spunk to him. He was able to deliver sort of this sort of rapid fire dialogue, but do it in a way that wasn't annoying. And he's a rather likable guy. I could see why people look at this Carl Denham as the Pentiment Carl Denham on film because even now in 2017, it's still a really great performance by Robert Armstrong. And the girl that he comes across to add to the production is Ann Darrow, played by Fay Wray, who, yeah, her acting style was the type of style that was seen during that time period, which I'm not the biggest fan of, but I could deal with it because of how captivating and beautiful Fay Wray is. So she was kind of like a derelict. She's kind of a homeless person, which is kind of crazy that she's a street person of all things. But he finds her. She's penniless. He convinces her to join him for what he proposes to be as the adventure of a lifetime. And the venture quickly gets underway. And during the voyage, the surly first mate, Jack Driscoll, played by Bruce Cabot, and I don't know if I said the name correctly, Bruce Cabot or Cabot. He falls in love with her, love at first sight. And I didn't really buy the romance, but it is what it is. I mean, that was the kind of thing that was typical for the time period, where a guy will look at a hot girl and be like, "I love you," and they start making out. Nowadays, people might look at this, specifically feminists, and be like, "Oh, ooh, that is so misogynistic." But really, it's that's just typical for the time period. So he falls in love with her. After weeks of secrecy, Denham finally tells Angerhorn and Driscoll that their destination is Skull Island, an uncharted land shown on a map in Denham's possession. First off, I mean, what a title. I mean, that is such a great name for a mysterious island. Like one of the most iconic and best names for a mysterious island that anyone has ever thought of. Skull Island. It just rolls off the tongue. So, Denham also cryptically alludes to some monstrous creature that's rumored to dwell on the island, a legendary entity only known as Kong. Well, that's another good name, too. King Kong. I mean, or just Kong. So, when they find the island and the anchor offshore, about 30 minutes into the movie, they see a native village separated from the rest of the island by a giant ancient stone wall. Uh, They end up landing there on their boats, including the filming crew and Anne. They witness a group of natives preparing to sacrifice a young maiden known as the Bride of Kong. The intruders are spotted, which are the people in the landing party. The chief angrily stops the ceremony, and when he sees Anne, he offers to trade 6 of his tribal women for the Golden Woman. And they rebuff him and they return to the venture. It's like, no, you ain't having her. Now, there's one little line in this scene that kind of cracked me up, and it's not intention. It's not intentional at all. It's an unintentional bit of humor for me because of what I thought one of the natives said. So one of the natives is just, yelling and doing and saying, kind of gibberish in a native tongue that I don't understand. And I swear to God, one of the natives all of a sudden yells, Costco! And I'm thinking, Costco? Like the store Costco? Uh, Costco! Buy in bulk at Costco! So I know Costco probably didn't exist back then, but it just reminded me of Costco, and I used to shop there all the time with my parents when I was a kid. So I definitely chuckled at that little moment there. Yes, I mean, these are natives and they are portrayed as savages and they are portrayed by black people. I don't consider it to be racist though because they're natives of this island and I didn't really see anything that was really racist about how they portrayed them. It's not like they were white guys in blackface. At least not that I noticed anyway. I could be completely wrong. It wasn't anything like I'd seen in The Birth of a Nation, which was incredibly racist. Um, but anyway, that night, a band of natives, they end up kidnapping Anne from the ship because they're not going to take no for an answer. They lead her through a huge wooden gate in the stone wall. They tie her to an altar. She is offered to Kong, and Kong finally makes his grand entrance. And this is around the 46-minute mark. And honestly, that's quite a while to wait for a film that's only 100 minutes without the overture. But it was worth the wait because the film was interesting enough. The whole idea of this film crew getting together and going on a boat and heading over to some mysterious island, that was enough to grab my attention. Excuse me. So when Kong finally shows up, it's definitely worth the wait, and it's very rewarding. He shows up around the 46-minute mark, and it is just wow. Like you're in awe. The effect is fantastic. It's a really phenomenal looking stop motion effect. He just breaks through the wall. Anne is screaming her head off. If I was in the same position, I would be too. So Kong then carries off Anne into the jungle as the Venture crew, alerted to Anne's abduction, they arrive back on the island. They open the gate, and Denham, Driscoll, and some volunteers enter the jungle in hopes of rescuing Anne. And this is where the pace of the film really picks up. Now, it was pretty well paced early on because you get to the island 30 minutes into the movie. That's a really nice setup for the rest of the movie because then you have a lot of time spent on the island. And after Kong shows up, it's just non-stop action. Pretty much after the 46-minute mark. There's really not a lot of breathing room. So Kong is carrying Anne away, and they're trying to get her. They discover that Kong is far from the only giant prehistoric creature on the island, because then they get charged by a Stegosaurus, who they manage to kill, which is another fantastic, just really cool and really good looking stop motion effect. And even with Kong, there are some other impressive effects that aren't stop motion. For one, there's a mechanical mock-up of Kong, and it's giant in size. It's a mock-up of his head, and you see the eyes move a little bit, and the mouth moves up and down, and it has limited movement. But I was just blown away by it, considering I never even thought there even was something like that was ever used for a film from this time period. In 1976, having a mock-up giant Kong head, that's not far-fetched. But in 1933, to have a mock-up giant Kong head that actually can move and do something, I mean, that's a precursor to animatronics. That's impressive. So you see a little bit of that with Kong. So they shoot at the Stegosaurus, they kill it. They construct a raft in order to cross a swamp. A brontosaurus capsizes their supplies and the raft and kills several of the men, which was admittedly kind of funny. Excuse me, just getting a drink real quick. Because, as we all know, brontosauruses are herbivores. They're not carnivores. But then again, this is in 1933, so maybe it wasn't common knowledge that brontosauruses were not meat eaters. But I don't know for sure. But anyway, hey, it's still good fun. Not for the guys who get eaten, but it's still good fun. And speaking of getting eaten, I mean, there's a lot of people who die in this movie. I mean, there's like 12 of the crew members. They get killed by these dinosaurs, or they get dumped into a chasm by Kong. A bunch of the natives get stomped on by Kong or get eaten. I mean, it was pretty shocking to me, like how violent this film is. Now, again, this was actually a pre-code Hollywood film, and that means that this was before censorship and before the MPAA and all of that stuff. So you probably, I'm not that familiar with the other films of this time period, but I'm pretty sure there were other movies that were also probably equally as violent. But I mean, Kong is a straight up savage in this movie. He's eating people, stomping on them. There's a scene later where he has Anne in his hands and he's taking off her clothes and he's leering at her like a pervert. He's pulling off her clothes and he's like, you know, it looks like he's one step away from monkey rape. I mean, it is that. I mean, it is that. I mean, maybe I gotta just have a dirty mind, but I mean, he's ripping her clothes off. He's looking at her. I mean, she doesn't end up being naked, but I mean, he does. He tears some clothes off of her. It looks like he's one step away from ripping a bra strap off and showing some titty or cupping some titty. Yeah, it is something else. you know, uh, yeah. So, Kong is kind of an asshole in this movie. It's surprising. Uh, I was under the impression before I saw this that Kong is some misunderstood beast in this movie, but no, he's just a beast. Period. Um, so these other men, they flee through the jungle. They encounter Kong. They try to cross a ravine, and he just shakes them off the tree. There's like a tree that's fallen down over the ravine, and they're trying to cross it to get away from Kong. And he just grabs it and just dumps all these guys to their deaths. And I'm just like, wow, Kong, was that really necessary? Nope. It's like Kong is like a slasher movie villain or something. He's just trying to come up with different ways to kill these poor sailors. And of course, that's where the deleted spider scene probably might have been thrown in there. Because apparently, there was a scene that was cut from this film that was too intense for audiences back in 1933 or 34. So they cut it out. And it was the scene where these spiders like eat a bunch of these um, a bunch of these sailors who had gone on the landing party and ended up on Skull Island. But I'm like, really? Too intense with a movie where countless natives are getting eaten and stomped on later in the film. Sailors are getting dumped into chasms. Kong is grabbing people and chewing on them and using their heads like they're toothpicks. I mean, dinosaurs are eating people right and left. Like the spider scene really is too much. I don't know. It's kind of crazy to me that that would be the scene. Oh, all this other carnage and violence. That's fine. Oh, spiders eating guys? Oh no, hell no, no way, no way. We can't possibly do that. That can't possibly be in the film. Um, it's just kind of crazy to me when you consider everything else that's in the movie. So then a T-Rex threatens Anne, and then Kong gets in a really epic battle with it and kicks its ass. Driscoll continues to shadow Kong and Anne while Denham returns to the village for more ammunition. He wants to use these gas bombs that they've brought with them to maybe knock out Kong and take him with them to New York. So they arrive in Kong's lair in a mountain cave. Anne is attacked by a snake-like Lasmosaurus, which looks like a plesiosaur or something like that, or yeah, it doesn't really look like a snake. It's kind of weird. It's like I don't even know why it wasn't just a snake. It was like a snake-like dinosaur. Kong wrestles it and kills it. Kong is distracted while killing a Petrodon, which is basically a pterodactyl, but it's a different type. Which tried to fly away with Anne. Driscoll reaches her, and they climb down a vine dangling from a cliff ledge. Kong notices and starts pulling them back up. They let go, and they fall into the water below, safe and sound. They run through the jungle and back into the village, where Denham, Englehorn, and the surviving crewmen are waiting. Kong, following, breaks open the gate. Breaks open the gang. Well, he kind of does break open the gang in this movie. He breaks open the gate and just murderously rampages through the village. Whoever wrote the Wikipedia description here nailed it. That's precisely what he does. He breaks open the gate in an iconic sequence, rips through the gate, and just starts stomping on natives right and left, eats them, chews on them, spits them out. He's even like going out of his way to terrorize these natives. Like there's just a native guy who's just sitting there in his hut minding his own business, and here comes King Kong being, a king asshole, king asshole monkey, king giant, asshole ape, and just grabs the guy out of his house and just chews on him and spits him out and stomps on some of his friends. It's just like, wow. There's a scene with the animatronic dummy head where Kong has like a native in his teeth, and the guy's screaming for help. And it's just like, wow. It's just it is shocking how violent this movie is. Because you're bred, at least I don't know if bred is the right word for it, but I have learned from my time on the surf so far that it's a learned behavior or learned knowledge on my part that films from this era aren't violent. They aren't controversial, because they were censored so much. Not King Kong, but then again, it was a pre-censorship film, so it makes sense. But it still blows my mind that a film from 1933 can be as violent and as crazy as this movie is. So on shore, Denham, now determined to bring back Kong alive, he knocks him unconscious with a gas bomb, and he chains and shackles him, and he presents him to this Broadway theater audience as Kong, the eighth wonder of the world! And Anne and Jack are brought on the stage to join him, followed by an invited group of press photographers. And they decide to take photos all at once, which freaks out Kong. He confuses that for an attack. He breaks loose. The audience flees in terror because they're scared shitless, understandably so. Anne is whisked away to a hotel room on a high floor with Jack, but Kong scales the building and finds her. Earlier before, he grabs another woman and he realizes it's not Anne, and he just drops her like a bad habit to her death. Just drops her. Like, my voice cracked there because I can't even believe it myself. It's just like, oh, not Anne. Fuck you, bitch. Die. It's just like, holy shit. Man, savage is right. King Kong, hashtag savage as fuck. So he gets Anne, and of course it doesn't drop her because it's like, this is Anne. And he carries her in his hand again. He rampages through the city. He wrecks a bullet train. Not a bullet train didn't exist, but it's like it's a train, an elevated train. He wrecks it, tears it up. He breaks through the tracks, terrifies everybody, and like fucks shit up. He climbs up the Empire State Building. At the top of the Empire State Building, he's met by 4 military biplanes. Kong sets Anne down. He battles the planes in the sequence that a lot of people remember and know. Even people who haven't seen King Kong know of this scene. He manages to down one of them, but he finally succumbs to their blasts of gunfire and he falls to his death in a rather brutal way. He falls and he slams and hits one side of the building and then tumbles down the building. and Anne and Jack are reunited. Denham arrives and he pushes through a crowd surrounding Kong's body in the street. And when a policeman remarks to him that the plane's got him, Denham ends the film perfectly with this memorable quote. "Oh no, it wasn't the airplanes. It was beauty killed the beast." And that's King Kong. Now, yeah, it's king size entertainment, King Kong size entertainment. Um, this is definitely one of the best films of its genre, giant ape movies. Definitely one of the best films from its era. Uh, it's fast paced, it's well directed, really well directed considering all the different effect shots and things like that are in the movie, which had never been done before and had never been seen before. The performances by the cast are all competent and all solid. The music is good. It really complements the film well. The visual effects, I mean, the stop motion effects, they are really great. They're great, fantastic. Um, I know I keep using the word great or fantastic. I can't, what it's kind of hard to come up with new words to describe how great something looks. So I just kind of go with the same thing. But really, they are. They are absolutely a highlight to the film. And they add to the enjoyment of it. And because I just like it. I like watching films with this stop motion stuff. It's a lost art. And something about lost arts really does appeal to me. And I mean, I mean, it's hard to really come up with anything else to say about the film. I think I've said mostly everything that I wanted to say about the movie. I mean, if there's anything I missed in regards to what's effective about this film, I'll just say it right here. It's really effective. Um, yeah, it's a great film. It's a classic. It's considered a classic for a reason. And I'm really glad to have it in my collection, and I'm really glad I saw it. So anyway, I don't know what else to say about King Kong, except if I was to rate it out of 5 stars, I give it 5 out of 5. 2 thumbs up. It's like I said, it's a wonderful film. It's the eighth wonder of the world, and it's a wonderful movie. Um, although I have to admit, one of the taglines is kind of bad. One of the taglines for the film at the time was called "King Kong comes," or like "He comes." I'm just like, I don't, they didn't have probably think of that kind of thing back then, but like when you look at that tagline now, you're like, I don't need that mental image in my head. But the other taglines were fine, and overall, it's a really fine film. It's a fantastic movie. So I've talked your ear off long enough about King Kong. Um, if you're interested in any more of the behind the scenes type stuff, there's plenty of things that you can get your hands on. Books, articles online. Buy this DVD that has so has a good amount of special features. It has a 7-part documentary on it on the making of the movie. That's really good. But anyway, yeah, I'm all conged out for this review. Thanks for watching, and as always, I will see you guys later. See ya.